very, very happy. I think it was a great qualifying session.
It's very difficult to put everything together because we've got to set up this car in quite extreme ways in order to extract more out of it.
Be fighting for a podium should be a minimum.
I feel like I've just never driven a Formula One car before, so
yeah, it was tough all weekend, I think.
What do you think you can rescue tomorrow?
I really no idea.
Why did so many teammates have such a stark contrast in performance, driving the same cars? This year's Bahrain qualifying exposed one of the biggest challenges of this season's F1 cars, and that is how narrow of an operating window these cars have. And if you're not comfortable operating in that particular window, you just don't have the confidence to extract the maximum from those cars. And that was evident from the inter-team battles of the top 4 teams. Let's look at Piastri versus Norris in the McLarens. Norris actually starts off the lap ever so slightly ahead of Piastri. And you can see that gap build up right here because he's carrying a higher top speed. But then things go downhill right after that. So Norris takes a little bit more speed into turn 1, and because of that, he compromises his exit out of turn 1, and therefore he isn't able to extract the maximum out of the car to get into turn 2 because he unsettles the car just a tad bit, and then that just compromises everything thereafter. And you can see that Oscar was able to keep the car under control, and even though he has a lower apex speed, he's able to carry more speed out of the corner, out of the exit, all the way up to turn 4, and that's where he gains a huge amount of time right here. You can see that he has that higher top speed right there, and that's what causes him to gain almost 0.2 of a second just in that first sequence of corners. And that is huge. And you know, when you've nailed the first part of the lap really well, you have the confidence to go and push even more in the next part of the lap. Whereas for Lando, it was the opposite. He knew he made a mistake, and so now he's trying to play catch up. And then because he has a lower top speed going into turn 4, he's trying to extract a little bit more within the corner, get just a tad bit more into the corner. And so you can see that in the speed, he brakes a little early, but then he carries a little bit more speed into the corner. And again, he does that same thing over here as well compared to Oscar. But then again, it affects his corner exit speed just a tad bit. You can see that Oscar has a little bit of red outside, slightly poking outside. And that shows that he has just a marginally higher amount of top speed. So that's why you can kind of see it's just a small amount of gap, it's not too much. And then again, within turn 8, he's like, okay, I can try to make this work, salvage this. And that's where things go really wrong for Norris. And that really shows how he's trying to overcompensate for the car and then feels not confident in the car that it's giving him what he wants, and then he makes more mistakes. So you can see that in the rest of the lap, especially going into turn 5, 6, and 7, where again, he's trying to carry a bit more speed into the corner, has to brake a lot more compared to Oscar, so his apex speed is a lot lower, and then tries to gain that back, but then he just doesn't have the grip to exit out of the corner as Oscar did, and you can see that in the throttle. He's just not able to use the same amount of throttle response that Oscar is able to. Surprisingly enough, the gap didn't increase that much there, but I do think that you can kind of see throughout the lap that his confidence slowly starts to wane, and he's trying to overcompensate for that by trying to go much quicker into the corner. And that also might be just his driving style, where he tries to enter the corner at a higher speed at the expense of the exit, but he wants the car to cooperate so that the exit speed doesn't get affected as much. But with this car, he's just not able to do that. The car just gets unsettled at the apex, and he's not able to extract that corner exit speed as well or as smoothly as Oscar. And you can see that especially in turn 8, which is one of the most important corners of this track, where he just has a lower apex speed and does not have the same corner exit speed as Oscar does. And that's where you can see the gap just balloons back up. And that's the story for the rest of the lap, where every other corner, he's just not able to drive the car the way the car wants to be driven, and hence he doesn't get confidence going into every corner and exiting every corner, and he's not able to get on the throttle as quickly as he wants to. And so that makes a huge difference, and you can see slowly but surely the gap keeps on increasing, and it goes up to almost more than 4/10 of a second. And that just shows you how precisely you have to drive these cars. And the same is true with Verstappen and Tsunoda in the Red Bull, where you have Verstappen just eking out more speed going into the turn 1. And so he's already building up a little bit of a gap. But turn 1, 2, and 3, Tsunoda actually does really well to keep in line with Verstappen. He has a slightly lower top speed going into turn 5, 6, and 7. And I feel like this might be just setup difference, where he's trying to get a little bit more downforce. He might have set up the car to have a little bit more downforce, and therefore is compromising a little bit on the top speed. But even with that, he isn't able to extract the same amount of cornering performance as Verstappen is able to. And that, again, it's only his second race in that new Red Bull, so you can give him a little bit of slack for that. But it just shows you how precisely and how on the edge you need to drive these cars to be able to extract the maximum out of them. And that's just evident in the fact how Verstappen is just using the throttle and modulating it when he's exiting a corner. You can see how many more adjustments he makes right here in turn 4, which is really crucial going into turn 5 and 6. And he's able to carry a bit more top speed into those sequence of corners. And that is evident in that throttle response again, where he's on the throttle way quicker, exiting out of the corner, and then he modulates it just a tad bit, keeps the top speed, and so he's able to carry more speed into turn 8 because of that. And even though going into the corner he's a little slow, but his corner exit is just spot on. You can see that he gets on the throttle way quicker than Tsunoda, and then because of that he just starts eking out a gap slowly but surely. And then turn 9 and 10, that's where the big difference maker happens between him. Like, he's able to carry just so much more speed into the corner, and his exit again isn't compromised. And so he carries that all the way up to turn 11 and 12. And you can see that in the gap, it just starts increasing. And the same happens especially in all of the medium and high speed corners, where Tsunoda is just not able to keep the car planted the way that he wants it to. And that causes him to just lose confidence exiting the corner. And you can see that over and over again, one corner after the other. And then that gap slowly but surely builds up. But again, that's just his second race in that car. So it will take him a while to get used to it. Hopefully it definitely gets better, because I'd love to see him way closer to Max and be competitive with him. But it does show you have to be comfortable with the car in the way that it's being driven, or in the way that it has to be driven, to be able to extract the maximum out of it. And then you can adopt a more extreme setup, where even if you don't have the amount of downforce levels, you're not losing that much on the straights, and you're able to just gain a little bit more time that way. But perhaps the biggest indicator of how difficult the car is to drive and how it affects the confidence of the driver is probably Ferrari. And you can see that between Leclerc and Hamilton. Going into turn 1, 2, and 3, Leclerc and Hamilton are basically evenly matched, even all the way up to turn 4. But turn 4, that's where it slowly starts showing the cracks in Hamilton's confidence in driving that Ferrari. So he has a lower apex speed, whereas Leclerc, if you look at it, he's just able to get on the throttle a little quicker and is able to carry a bit more speed in that apex, and at the same time not able to compromising his exit out of turn 4 and into the sequence of corners at turn 5, 6, and 7. And even there, he's modulating the throttle on the edge of the limit of the grip, and he's just testing the car. Is it able to stick to the track? Is it giving him oversteer, understeer? He's just managing it so well. And it's just slight differences between him and Hamilton. And that makes all the difference in the speed carrying into those high-speed corners. And that's where you can see the gap just slowly increasing. And then in turn 8, that's where Hamilton just doesn't have the confidence to keep the car going into that apex at higher speeds. So he's at a lower speed than Leclerc. But then he actually gets a much better exit than Leclerc. So even though he loses a bit of time, he gains that back on that straight. Again, turn 9 and 10, same problem. Isn't able to extract the maximum out of the corners, so loses a bit of time, but compensates for that in the corner exit. And so he gains back some of that time and evens it out a little bit. But turn 11 and 12 and all the medium speed corners after that, he just isn't able to get the car settled, and that really hampers his exit speed right here. And you can see he has a lower apex speed. He also has lower speed exiting out of the corner, and only towards the end he basically catches up to him. But by that time he's already lost all of that gap. Same thing here, loses time there, and then even though the exit is basically the same compared to Leclerc, he's already lost a bunch of time in the corners, that the gap to Leclerc basically balloons out to be almost 0.6 of a second. And this shows exactly how narrow of an operating window the car has. And you can see Leclerc is toying with the absolute limit. Basically, you can see that everywhere in all of his throttle responses, that he is just checking the car to see if it's on the limit. And if it's slightly out of the limit, he's backing off a bit, but then getting on the throttle again. So that's where you see all the blips in the throttle all the way throughout. Compared to Hamilton, who's trying to do the same, but doesn't have that same confidence, so it's not as on the limit as what Leclerc is doing. And this is really evident when you compare what Mercedes's lap trace looks like, because that's a completely different scenario to what Leclerc and Hamilton are going through. If you look at the throttle responses over here, look how much smoother it is compared to Leclerc and Hamilton. Like, they can get on the throttle, the Mercedes drivers can get on the throttle, stick it all the way till the end of the corner. And you can see that makes a huge difference in the lap times as well, because Antonelli, being a rookie, is doing really well in keeping up with George. He's making slight mistakes where he still needs to optimize some of the corners. He's leaving a little bit of time on the table over here and here. Here actually does really well. But it just shows you how having a really compliant car that does exactly what you want and isn't unstable in the corners can really help you push your lap times higher, because it gives you the confidence to push the car to the limit, and you know that it's not gonna become unstable and lose you time, so you're not doing micro corrections all throughout. So that makes a huge difference. But it does show that Mercedes might not have the outright fastest car, but they do have the most compliant car. So it can make a huge difference when, let's say, either if Norris or Piastri make a mistake, or Leclerc is not having a good day during qualifying, which is hard to say because Leclerc is almost all the time has great days in qualifying. But if on the off chance that they do have an off day and Mercedes just nail the car, they can be right up there at the top, because they have a compliant car which is prone to making less mistakes. And this could be the difference maker. And that's why this season, it might not be just the car, like in the previous seasons where if you had a dominant car, you could basically win all of the races. But this season, because the cars are so hard to drive, even if you have a dominant car, if you're not extracting the maximum out of it in that particular operating window that the car is meant to be driven, and you make mistakes, someone else can capitalize. And so the driver does make a difference this season. And I'm really excited to see how the championship is going to shape up, because it's going to be the driver that makes the difference and not necessarily the car, because the cars there is a pecking order, but they're still pretty evenly matched. And because the cars are harder to drive, if one team, let's say McLaren, fumbles something similar to how it happened in Japan, where they were on it, but Max just had a blistering of a lap, and then he took pole, and then he won the race from pole. So it can definitely make a huge difference. So I'm really excited for this season.